Welcome into another episode of Note News. Today we're going to finish our Central Division preview by examining the top three teams from last season. We'll assess their offseason and current roster to determine where each team stands and what their outlook is for 2024-25. All that and more on this episode of Note News. All right, here we go. It's our final Central Division preview. As we're recording here, it's September 12th. So some exciting things happening in the hockey world as we sort of get really a lot closer to the start of the season. So we're in I know we've said it before, but we're in the home stretch now, and it's not going to be long before we see some hockey starting this weekend, right, with the Prospect Showcase. Are you excited for that?
I am super excited for that. Apologies to our listeners. I am a little bit sick today, so sorry if I sound a little stuffed up, but it's all good. We power through. I got that announcement today. Already got alarm set on my phone, so really excited to see those games and get into preseason and then real hockey.
Yeah, so stay tuned with Note News. We're going to cover all of that. We're going to do a really cool episode here soon talking about some Blues prospects. We'll talk about the Prospect Showcase, and then we're going to do some coverage of those preseason games as they come. The best way to stay tuned and follow along with all that is to like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel especially. That helps a lot. And then rating Note News wherever you listen helps a lot as well. We're also on social media, if you're not aware, on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Note News Pod. So give us a follow and check out some of the stuff that we post there if you want to stay up to date with what we're doing. Why don't we get right into it? We've got three teams to talk about today. On our previous Central Division preview episodes, we've had 2 per episode, so go check those out if you haven't already. Episode 1 of the series, the little mini series that we're doing, we covered the Chicago Blackhawks and Minnesota Wild. Episode 2 was the Nashville Predators and Utah Hockey Club. And then obviously today we're doing the other 3, which are the Winnipeg Jets, the Colorado Avalanche, and the Dallas Stars. So why don't we do it in that order? Let's get into it. We'll start with the Winnipeg Jets. We had a little bit of a Jets discussion on the previous episode, sort of in our discussion of the Central Division standings. But let's start by talking about this offseason in particular for the Jets. A lot of people don't like it. I think I'm one of them. I think they may be taking a step back overall. Their offseason wasn't very active in terms of additions. There was a lot more, it seems like, notable subtractions than additions. They might be taking a step back after losing some of the depth, particularly among the forward group, I think, that made them so strong last season. Alec, what are your thoughts on the Jets offseason, just sort of overall?
It was an offseason where they couldn't really have done much, and they didn't. As you said, they did have a couple subtractions. I don't think any of them were really going to shake the foundation of their team, but you never know, chemistry off the ice and in the locker room, what that'll look like. But and in terms of on-ice statistics, definitely losses of good players, but mostly the core of this roster is still intact. So yeah, in terms of their offseason, they really didn't have that much cap space to work with at all. They were one of the teams with the least amount of cap space coming into the offseason. Now looking forward, that they have lost a couple notable free agents as well as some money coming off the books next year. They actually could have a little bit to play as well as with the cap going up. They could have some money to play around with, which actually could maybe give them a chance to extend their window, depending on how suave they can be with their moves and whatnot. But yeah, in terms of their offseason, I mean, it was fine, I guess, maybe a little bit on the bad side, but again, not really much they could have done in my eyes.
Yeah, I think from a sort of overarching point of view, what I didn't like about it is that there were some, they, like you said, they didn't lose sort of the main core, but they suffered some losses among the forward group, among defensemen, and in goal. So I just feel like it was there was some notable subtractions in all areas, and that's sort of a red flag for me. But let's sort of get into some of those subtractions and additions. We'll start with the notable subtractions being Tyler Toffoli, Sean Monahan, Brendan Dillon, Nate Schmidt, Laurent Brossoit, who we talked about already, and Rutger McGroarty, who was, not making an impact at the NHL level really quite yet, but they traded him to Pittsburgh for Braden Yeager, who is one of our notable additions, along with Capo Kakkonen. And I mean, it's like a lot of subtractions and not that many additions, I feel like. Do you want to talk about any of those subtractions first? Sort of any names there that you feel like could, be a big loss for the Jets, or anything significant stand out to you there?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like in terms of actual talent on the roster, their two biggest subtractions were Toffoli and Monahan, but both of those guys were deadline rentals that they tried to, make a push to make a run in the playoffs, and of course that didn't end up happening. So again, they definitely lost talent, but it still feels like the core of this roster is intact. And sure, they would have liked to keep guys like Toffoli and Monahan to bolster their depth. But given how player friendly the market was this year, I think maybe not they were wise, but I understand why they didn't go about tendering them contracts or ending up signing them. We don't know exactly if they were offered or not by the Winnipeg Jets. But it makes sense. The market really skewed heavily towards the player, and as I mentioned, the Jets didn't have a ton of cap space to play around with, so now they have a little bit more to go forward. You could almost see this as a little bit of and I'm going to use this word differently to how we've discussed it on the podcast, but a little bit of a real retool for the Jets with where the Jets are at in their excuse me timeline. As in, maybe the expectations this year aren't a cup winning team, but still a playoff, hopefully a team that makes the playoff. But with that additional cap space, perhaps they could make one or two moves that could put them back into that upper echelon of truly elite teams. But it's hard to say. I'm not in the Jets war room, as it were. But yeah, in terms of the other losses, I'm not really sure there's a ton to really comment on there. Mostly I think they're looking just to run it back essentially, and maybe make another move or two at the deadline this year to fill those holes.
Yeah. What about on the additions side with, the prospect swap of Rutger McGroarty and Braden Yeager with Pittsburgh, but then I think more notably on the goalie side of things, obviously they're pretty set when it comes to the primary goaltender. But it seems like probably a downgrade for that second goalie. What do you think about sort of the exchange of Capo Kakkonen for Brossoit?
I mean, I actually kind of like Capo Kakkonen. I don't know. Goalies are goalies. It is hard to say. I just have he always whenever I see him playing against a team that, when I'll turn on a game and whatever team he's on is playing or playing against, whatever. He just very analytical here on Note News. He looks the part of a solid-ish goalie, especially in a backup role. I think he had to play a lot more previously in his career, and behind arguably the best goalie in the NHL. I think this will actually, and especially one of the best defenses in the NHL. I actually like how Kakkonen is going to fit in this year. And I also kind of like Braden Yeager. Maybe this is just because I've followed the Penguins a little bit more closely than some other teams in the NHL in the past couple of years. Maybe I'm feeding into just that Pittsburgh sports fan delusion, but I don't know. I like Braden Yeager, and I don't really have a ton to say about Rutger McGroarty. But I don't really know if either of them are going to make significant additions this year to their team. So I suppose that remains to be seen. But I guess I would say I like their moves on, like, I like the additions they made, but it doesn't really raise the bar for me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think for me, it's not an issue of whether their additions were bad. Like I think the players that they brought in were good and they make them better. I just think the net value of additions and subtractions, I think they suffered some bigger losses than they brought in. So I think that could be a big issue. Again, we say that Tyler Toffoli and Sean Monahan, are the significant losses for them, but they didn't play much last season, and the Jets did okay. Obviously, made the playoffs, finished second in the Central Division, but I don't know. It just seems like a lot of losses, sort of like I've already mentioned. And if you listen to the previous episode, you probably know I'm a little bit down on the Jets for this coming season. Why don't we talk about some of their top players? I think this is sort of a more interesting discussion than some of the other teams that we've talked about. Who do you see as their top forward? Is it Scheifele? Do you think projecting some growth, maybe like Cole Perfetti even could become the top guy? Nikolai Ehlers as well is a name to pay attention to there. Who do you like from the forward group in Winnipeg?
I would say that probably their star young winger is still their key piece, Kyle Connor. I like, I don't know. He just kind of, when I think of the Jets, Kyle Connor is the first name I think of. He's there. To me, he reminds me a lot of Matt Barzal. Maybe not exactly how they play, but just kind of the role they fit. Like kind of an old guy or a young guy in a group of old guys who just is like showing them up. I don't know. That probably made sense to only me. But anyways, yeah, Connor was their leader in points last year, and I expect he'll do it again. And then, well, actually, among the forwards, then yeah, the next name would be Scheifele, who's just a rock solid, defensively phenomenal number one center. He's not really going to ever reach that upper echelon, and I believe this is his age 31 season. He's never going to, hit in that tier 1 or maybe even that tier 2 of centers, but he's just so solid. Like, you are more than happy, especially if you guys playing with him. Like, as you mentioned, Nikolai Ehlers is really nice, and yeah, Kyle Connor. Those are the names I would pick out of the forward group first.
Yeah, I don't know why Kyle Connor was not one that I mentioned. I just must have skipped over him. But yeah, it is a deep forward group, like I've mentioned before, and they did, as we've already talked about. We can move on. They did suffer some losses there, but it is still pretty a pretty deep forward group. What about on defense?
For sure.
I mean, I think there's an obvious number one defenseman in Winnipeg, and Josh Morrissey. But who else do you like? And what? I mean, obviously you would like Josh Morrissey, but how do you see it sort of playing out on the blue line for the Jets?
Yeah, I mean, Morrissey really has come on to the NHL. Like, took the NHL by notice in the past couple seasons. Number one defenseman. I mean, kind of feels, to make another player comp at his age, kind of feels a little bit like Evan Bouchard. Just so good offensively and defensively. He's a monster, almost point per game last year. That's just crazy. I mean, heck, he could win the Norris. He's in that like dark horse for Norris candidate every year. Outside of him, last year, just going by points, their number two guy was Neil Pionk. Had 33 points in 82 games. But Dylan DeMello wasn't far behind him in 7 less games, had 6 less points, and is projected to be their top line guy. Between the two, I'd say I probably like DeMello a little bit more, but I think that's just because I think he's proven a little bit more. I think Pionk could prove his worth at the NHL level. It's a very silly name. But yeah, their defense is just so good defensively, and Morrissey is certainly an offensive threat. He is a playmaker's playmaker, and his shot isn't terrible too. But DeMello and Pionk behind them are responsible enough offensively, and then really all of their top four, adding in then Dylan Sandberg, are just so like locked down defensively. Plus, they get really good help defensively from their forwards. This is kind of the calling cards of the Winnipeg Jets, is they are a suffocating defense. Although
Yeah.
it isn't so much the Carolina Hurricanes suffocating defense to where you don't score on them. It's more so perhaps they aren't quite as good defensively, but it's because they also risk the threat of a rush attack going the other way because they have the offensive threats that maybe the Hurricanes don't.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know why. Like I hear the things you're saying, and I agree. Like there's depth there. I don't know what it is. I just don't like them a whole lot. I think
Sports happen.
yeah, that's true. What are anything else you want to add on the goalie discussion? Obviously, they are they're really set in net with Connor Hellebuck, but anything you want to sort of add on the backup goalie discussion?
Yeah, I mean Hellebuck, a resounding Vezina win.
Yeah.
It feels like the last couple of Vezinas have kind of been blowouts, which really doesn't feel like that happens all that often in my hockey watching experience. But anyways, yeah, I think the backup goalie situation will always be aided by the fact that they have Connor Hellebuck and they have one of the best defenses in the league. It almost like, sure, maybe talent wise, you could argue that you like Persois more than Kakinen, and that's fine. I don't necessarily disagree with you, but it's more so I think the structure of this Jets defense is so good that they will make mid-tier backup goalies look great because that's just the type of team that they play. And I'm expecting them to run it back, but who knows? Maybe someone on this core just got too old and lost a step, or they lost a really key locker room guy that we don't know about. That's that stuff is hard to project, which is why I think the Jets are still going to be a scary regular season team. When things come postseason, it seems to always be different with the Winnipeg Jets.
Yeah.
But in the regular season, I think they're going to be fine, and I think their backup goaltending situation is going to be status quo.
Yeah. I guess so. One point I did think was interesting was that for Kakinen last year, sorry, let me pull this up real quick. He started the season in San Jose, right? Where he played 31 games and then finished the season with New Jersey. He only played 6 games with them, but had a .923 save percentage in those 6 games for what that's worth, behind a better defense than he was getting. So, I mean, maybe he'll be okay.
Goalies.
What?
Goalies.
It's hard to project. Do you think that Hellebuck will have anything near the kind of season that he had last year?
It's really hard to say that for any goalie, even someone as talented as Connor Hellebuck. So I would say no, just because it is hard to ever have that kind of season. But he's certainly capable of it. He's shown he's capable, at least twice now.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, obviously he's not going to win the Vezina again because as I've already predicted, it's going to be Jordan Binnington.
Right.
One sort of big question that I want to raise with the Jets is the Cole Perfetti contract. Do you think so? As we record today, he has no current contract. He's an RFA, and I mean, do you think that'll be an issue? I mean, obviously they have to get it done, right? Do you have any thoughts on the Cole Perfetti contract?
Yeah, I just think I don't know. It hasn't really crossed my mind. I mean, no one's going to pay up for his rights. It would be at least a first round pick for what he's shown, and it's also whatever they pay, the Jets would probably match it. I mean, looking at their cap situation, they've got a lot of money coming off the books after this year, and then another round after the next year. So I would imagine he's probably going to get a pretty long term deal. I don't know, at least 5 years, I'd guess.
Yeah.
Maybe more, because they don't have that many players locked up for long term deals. Man, even Morrissey only has 4 more years. That's crazy to me. So yeah, I'd probably imagine they're going to lock this guy down for quite some time.
Yeah. I'm sure they want to. And then the other big question is, I think is Nikolai Ehlers, who's an impending UFA. His contract is up after this season. Do you think he is like a potential trade candidate, or do you think they're going to want to rely on him to potentially make a run into the playoffs? And I mean, obviously they want to go deep in the playoffs, and he could be a big part of that. Do you think there's like a world where he is not on the Jets by the end of the season?
That would be fun. I think that would be crazy if they like traded him at the deadline. Like that would be a blockbuster, probably player for player and picks, honestly.
Yeah.
It depends. If the Jets are one of the best teams and they're trading Nikolai Ehlers, then who knows? Maybe they're getting like, I don't know, some high name player that you never thought was getting moved. I don't know, maybe like Mark Stone from the Golden Knights or something. I don't know, whatever. Excuse me. I do think they want to lock him up still through the course of the season, but yeah, I mean with the Cole Perfetti contract still out there, and then also Kyle Connor only has 2 more years, also including this coming one. So that's another impending contract that he's going to be making north of 8 or 9 million a year. So
Yep.
that's not a lot of money that's a lot of money to give for a couple players that, they probably only they have to make a cut somewhere. I wonder who it's going to be. Could it
Yeah.
be Ehlers? I doubt it's Connor. But maybe it's a Cole Perfetti. I doubt that too. I'm looking more maybe at someone like a Nino Niederreiter is a contract they could probably move off of. He's still really good, both defensively and offensively, and definitely a great player to their team. But if you're a team with this many good players, you got to make cuts somewhere.
That's
Interesting to
true.
think about.
Yeah. I think if the season is just unsalvageable, it just like is a disaster for whatever reason. I'm not saying that I think it will be, but I think that's sort of the scenario where they would be like, okay, let's just sort of call it, trade him away, because their prospect system isn't great, and that sort of brings us to our next bit. But I think if they do decide that they're not in it, he could get back some, I think, pretty solid prospects. So that might be something that they would painfully have to explore. But their prospect system overall, I would say, isn't great. I think I would put it somewhere in the 20 to 30 range, probably sort of in the middle of that, like 23, 24, 25, like something like that. Obviously, Cole Perfetti is a big name. We already mentioned they acquired Braden Yeager this offseason. Brad Lambert's another name. Are there any players in the Jets prospect system that you like, that you see having any sort of meaningful impact for the Jets this season?
The only guys I could see having an impact are really not like exciting names by any means. I mean, as you said, their prospect system is really not that good. It's a bunch of dart throws or like below replacement level to / maybe replacement level long-term NHL players. From their draft this year, Alphonse Frey was a player I really liked, a player I wanted the Blues to draft, but the Jets stole him like a pick or two before we could. Should be in okay, like middle to bottom pair, probably offensive defenseman. But yeah, in terms of like next year, I really don't know. I honestly, I like the younger ages of their, like specifically Frey and Jaeger. I like them a lot more than most of the guys in their system. And maybe that's just because they're young and they haven't proven that they're busts yet. But yeah, I don't think there's a ton of hope with this prospect system. I think you need NHL talent, and so yeah, if you do trade away like Nealers, you could certainly nab a pretty major prospect in that move if that's what they want to target.
Yeah, we'll have to see how it plays out. I think they are sort of, as is the case with probably all three of the teams I would guess that we're going to talk about today. It's like win now mode kind of thing, and like if it's not going to get done with this sort of core that they have right now, it's going to take something more significant to get back into it once the window closes. But What do you think is sort of the overall outlook for the Jets in 24, 25? Because so last season they finished second in the division, as I mentioned. Their record was 52, 24, and 6. They finished with 110 points, not very far from the Dallas Stars at the top of the division. Do you see them sort of having a similar season, stepping back? Did I say that I would go first already? I can go first. I think they will take a step back, as I've already mentioned. I think that the Avs will jump them, and then I think that the Preds will jump them. So I see them finishing fourth in the division, but I still think that they get a wild card, and maybe one of those like top wild cards, because they're obviously still a good team. But I just see I see Colorado having a better season, and then I see the Preds having a really good season. Maybe not, as we mentioned on the previous episode, so go check that out if you want to see the full breakdown of the Preds. But I see them having a good sort of outlook short term, maybe not long term, but I think they have a good year next year. What do you think about the Jets' outlook this year?
Yeah, I certainly think that's well within the range of outcomes, and I do think they're a pretty clear, at least going into this season, tier above of the other like wild card hopeful teams, especially in the Pacific or even their own like Central Division rivals. I think the Jets should be considered a better team than a lot of those, other wild card hopefuls. And I do think if you want to nitpick like how they could end up, struggling this year, if you just look at very simple point differential or goal differential, excuse me, they only scored 259 goals as a team last year, which actually put them fourth in the division. They allowed 199, which was incredible. I believe was the best in the NHL. Checking that. Yes, that was the best in the NHL by one goal. Yep.
Wow.
But yeah, so they had a monster defensive season, definitely helped out by Connor Hellebuck. You could maybe expect that to regress, and if you don't see their offense stepping up, which maybe it won't, that certainly could happen, they could definitely take a step back. I still do see the Jets as kind of a regular season wagon. I still have them in the top 3 of teams. I don't remember where I ended up putting them overall, so I'll pull that up right now. But I just think that this core is still so solid. And I don't know. I still think Hellebuck's got it. I don't think he's going to be quite a monster like he was last season, but I think it'll be enough. I do think Nashville has a lot more questions. And as we're about to get to, I don't know, might have a bit of a take about Colorado taking a step back, but I have Winnipeg finishing second, and I think that they are going to easily make the playoffs, and whether or not they move forward in the playoffs, as they haven't for a couple of years now, remains to be seen. Because, yeah, this is a team that I think is kind of tired of making the first round or even getting to the second round and just getting stomped, and that's it. I think as a franchise, especially with not a ton of history, if we're being entirely honest, their fan base especially is really clamoring for at least a Western Conference final appearance, this season or next. And I don't really know that they have the team to do that this season. So we'll see. I still think they're going to be really good in the regular season, but when talent comes down to it, I'm not really sure that they built a sustainable playoff winning model.
Yeah, maybe not. Yeah, so you said second, I said fourth, so they'll probably finish third. It's probably what we're looking at.
They'll probably win the division.
Oh, you think so? Yeah, maybe.
Just to spite us, yeah.
Why don't we move to the Avs? Let's just sort of move right along here. You sort of hinted at maybe some kind of a spicy, saucy kind of take on the Avs is what I'm hoping for. I don't know what it'll be. Sort of. Oh wait, real quick on the Jets note, I did want to mention when we'll see them this season before we move on. The first time we play the Jets will be at home on October 22nd. And let's see, going through, the next time will be in Winnipeg, December 3rd. So that'll be game 2 against them. The third time the Blues face them will be February 22nd. And then the fourth and final time will be April 7th, right at the end of the season. So I believe that's all of them. So if you want to see how the Blues literally match up with the Jets, those are the dates to watch. So, All right, now let's move on to the Avs. I think overall their offseason was okay. It wasn't active by any means. They sort of added around the fringes. Maybe took a step back. I think we can get into that. Some notable subtractions for them. I think the most notable is probably Sean Walker, and then obviously they lost Jack Johnson as well. Yakov Trenin went to the Wild, right? We talked about him already. They also lost Zach Parise and Andrew Cogliano. And their additions, the notable additions, are Parker Kelly, Eric Brandstrom, and Calvin DeHaan. So what do you think of the Avs offseason, Alec? Do you like what they did? Do you think they did enough to improve or continue sort of this really good stretch that they've had in recent years?
I actually really don't like their off season, and I know I just kind of, I don't know, you could call it making excuses or whatever for the Jets, is that they didn't really have a ton of space. The Avs also didn't have a ton of space, but they very much had a very disappointing year versus the Jets very much over exceeded expectations. So maybe both teams are hoping to just run it back and have, maybe the or expect some of the like more normal regression to come. But I actually really didn't like how they approached this offseason because I just don't really like their depth. I think their depth is really scary, especially at forward. I mean their center depth is really lacking. Casey Middlestead as a 2C is I don't know, for a team with potential cup expectations. I don't really know how much I can get behind that, but they still definitely have the star power. I guess you hope that their star power can carry them to another above expectation record. But yeah, I think they could have done a lot better sort of shuffling of the deck to shore up their depth, and that didn't happen.
Yeah, not quite. I I I don't know. I feel like they've got the Hart Trophy winner. Cale Makar is Cale Makar. I think that's sort of what they're relying on here. So I mean, and they've still got Mikko Rantanen, and I think like the with the Avalanche, the top tier is like crazy top tier. But you're right, like the depth beyond that isn't anything really all that exciting. What is it, when do you want to mix in your take here? Is this something we could throw in now, or is this more of like an outlook
I mean, it's
discussion?
just kind of a general, discussion of the team, and I think they're going to take a step back, essentially.
Okay,
I'll explain why as we go through it.
gotcha. Yeah. So
Partially,
for
the
their
depth is a big part of it, though, I will say.
yeah. Okay. Yeah. Fair. So obviously we mentioned a couple names already. I think this is one team in particular where it's just like really easy to name the top players for each position. Obviously Nathan MacKinnon is their top forward. Obviously Cale Makar is their top defenseman, and obviously Alexander Georgiev is their top goalie, but not because he's elite, but just because he's like the best they got, honestly.
Yeah.
And what are some other names you like sort of at each of those positions? And then if there's anything you like about those three, throw them at me.
I mean, you have to mention Mikko Rantanen as one of the
Yeah.
best, I don't know, 2015,
Yeah.
whatever number you land on is probably okay, forwards or just
Mm-hmm.
players in the NHL. Skaters at least. I guess goalies get kind of weird rankings, whatever. Yeah, Rantanen is cream of the crop, no doubt about that. And yeah, they've got, I guess, among their forwards, the other name I like is Lehkonen is put up some nice seasons.
Mm-hmm.
Usually will put up around, I don't know, 50, 60 points, which is solid depth. And then in their defense, I guess, I don't know, I like Devin Taves, but I feel
Mm-hmm.
like people talk about him as he's this like clear cut best second pair defenseman in the league and like easily a top 25 D man. And I just don't see that at all with Devin Taves. He's
Hmm.
good defensively and he's solid enough offensively, but I don't know. I'm not really scared of Devin Taves. I am scared of Cale Makar, but we've talked about Cale Makar. Check out our
Who isn't?
is that predictions episode?
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyways, I will say their defense is better, I think, well put together than their forwards. Josh Manson's a fine second pairing defenseman, and even their depth, like Brandstrom's, I like him and how he'll profile. So, yeah, I think their defense is fine. The top of their forwards is definitely terrifying, can hang with the best in the league.
Mhm.
But outside of that top, I really don't know that anyone on this roster scares me.
I do like Devin Taves, and I think the reason is, I mean, maybe he's not, like, as you said, maybe he's not one of like the top tier defensemen or anything like that. But when I think of Taves, I just think of like solidity, I guess. Like he's just seems so solid. Like defensively and offensively, maybe not elite on either side of the puck, but like just offensively, the past 3 seasons he's put up, let's see, 50 or more points in each of them. Obviously, like 2021, 22 was sort of, he put up more points in fewer games than the next 2 seasons, but I don't know, just like consistent, I think is and consistent at a high level, and I think that's worth something. So, what about the goalie? Anything you want to say
One
there?
more thing about Devin Taves, it's just when I watch him, he doesn't really ever excite me. It's more just like watching the other team. It's like an oh crap factor of like, we have to go after Cam Makar, we have to go after Nathan MacKinnon, and now there's just like this wide open shot scoring lane that Devin Taves kind of, it almost like lands in his lap, and that's kind of what I get when I watch Devin Taves.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's fair. But Zach Hyman had a great year last year, and he's sort of, I think that there's when certain players sort of know their roles, then I don't know. That doesn't mean they're not good, I guess, but it just sort of means they're playing a different game. I don't know. What about the goalie discussion? Obviously, Alexander Georgiev isn't he's been a little disappointing for them. Or was last year. The year before, he had a .918 save percentage, finished 7th in Vezina voting, and had a really good year. That was 2022-23. You don't like him. I can tell. You don't like Georgiev. Do you think he has any kind of bounce back? He had an .897 save percentage last year, and I think led the league in goals allowed. So gave up a lot. What are your thoughts on Alexander Georgiev?
I had this take before I was on the internet, so just trust me, bro. I promise I'm not lying. But yeah, no, so the Avalanche don't exactly have the defense of like the Hurricanes or the Jets, but I think they're like, outside of probably just those 2 teams, I don't know, maybe the Bruins are just like in a tier of their own defensively. I think the Avalanche are sort of in the next tier and arguably at the top of the next tier of defensive teams. And I said this back when they had Grubauer. I did think that they could never win a cup because I thought that you needed good goaltending, and it turns out you don't. You just need to have a perfect team in every other facet, which happy for them, they won, whatever. But Grubauer was terrible, and I said he was terrible, and then he goes to Seattle, and now he's like being chased out of the league. And Georgiev was not good before he came to the Avalanche, comes behind one of the best defensive structures in the NHL. As soon as he leaves Colorado, if he does, he's going to look terrible again. He's not that good of a goalie, and I will die on that hill. I don't think I don't know. It's just, to me, it's just the Avalanche team defense. I don't. That being said, like, he's good enough to play behind them. He's Grubauer, or Georgiev is certainly a tier better than Grubauer and isn't like atrocious, but I do think that he can definitely like lose you a game here or there. And this is actually where I kind of don't project a ton of progression. Sure, maybe he steps it up a little bit from where he was, but I still think that I don't know. I just don't think Georgiev is as talented a goalie as a lot of other goalies in his own division, mind you. And when it comes down to it, when talent comes to talent, I think that can shine through. So I think it's the defensive structure of the Colorado Avalanche has done a ton of favors to whoever is in net for them.
I think that's a fair criticism. I will say if he has a good year again, I think that the Avs could like win the division. Honestly, like I think that's sort of the biggest thing that they're missing that they've been bitten by. But they, like you said a little bit pre-show, they got a cup, and I think that they're obviously they want another, but if it doesn't work out, they still got a cup in this in this era,
Yeah.
and so what are
If
you
you
gonna
win a
do?
cup, kind of all like this didn't work out. Well, you won a cup, so
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, yes, that is true. Their prospect system, I think is, I mean, I think a lot of people think it's pretty bad.
Yeah, it's bad.
Yeah, it's bad. There's not much to say about it in terms of like names to highlight, but I'm gonna ask you anyways. Any names you like that the Avalanche have in their prospect system,
I
or
think
that you
it's
see
more
having an
intriguing.
impact?
Yeah, it's more intriguing names than anyone else. I mean, Gulyayev, I think is somewhat intriguing. Callum Ritchie, I guess, is the other one.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think with all these teams, well, the Dallas Stars could have a little bit of a different discussion, but at least these two are pretty much hoping for their NHL talent to win out.
Yeah, I think Callum Ritchie is the guy in their prospect system, and beyond that, nothing really excites me. I mean, he was really good in the OHL this past season, and um, I think that he could be, whenever he comes up, could be a significant part of their roster, but until that happens, and beyond him, there's not, I don't think, that much that interests me.
Fun
Um,
fact, they have signed to a two-way deal Callie Rosen, who was involved in 2022 with Nazem Kadri on that one play. Blues fans, you know the one I'm talking about. And I don't know if I've said this on the podcast before. I will hold that is more Callie Rosen's fault than it is Nazem Kadri's. So perhaps
mm,
they're learning from him the ways of goalie crashing and injuring. But maybe that is a discussion for a different episode.
maybe. I think we could talk a little bit longer about that at some point, but yeah. What do you see as the? I'll keep us moving here. What do you see as the outlook for the Avs in 2024-25? Last year, they finished in third in the Central Division. Their record was 50-25-7, 107 points. That sort of top tier of Dallas, Winnipeg, and Colorado. They were all pretty close together. I personally, I mean, I guess you could sort of surmise by now, think that they'll finish second in the Central. I think that Georgiev has a better season. I mean, I don't think he's great, but I don't think I'm quite giving him as hard a time as you are. I think he sort of levels out. Maybe he had a really good year the year before, a really bad year this past year. I think he finds something in the middle, and I think if he can do that, then they really have the potential um, to finish second in the division. And so that's where I'm picking him. That's where I'm not going to say like Sharpie in, maybe like one of those like erasable pens. I'll do that. I'll say second in the division is where I'll take him.
I have them finishing fourth. I think the Predators are going to leapfrog them this year. Maybe it's just off-season buzz, but I really have this team taking a step back. I don't think I'm not projecting Nathan MacKinnon to put up 140 points again. That was just a really monster season, and congrats and props to MacKinnon. He
Mm-hmm.
really. I would have called myself before a doubter in that, like, I didn't think he was as good as guys like Austin Matthews. Now there's no doubt in my mind, but I don't know that I'm projecting him to just be as good as he was. Also, so I don't think he's going to carry them to the best goals for in the NHL like they were last year. Also, among playoff teams, they had the 5th highest goals against, so the 5th most goals scored against them. And among Western Conference teams, they were actually number 1. So they had the most goals scored against them among Western Conference teams. As I said, I think Georgiev is kind of going to level out somewhere around at 890 to 910 at most save percentage. I don't really think that's going to do them any favors there. I think their defense is okay, but the other thing I mentioned, their center depth really scares me. I just don't know that they can hold up over a full season and be this world beater like they used to be in the past couple seasons. Now, do I think they get into the playoffs? Yes. Do I think they have a chance to make a deep run in the playoffs? Yes. I would probably, it would depend on the brackets when they come out, but probably I would imagine them making it to the second round, maybe the conference final. But I think this team's going to take a step back, so I have them finishing 4th.
Yeah, so we're sort of swapping Jets and Avs takes is what it sounds like. For the record, I think this is like one of the last years that they'll be this good. Like I said, I'm picking them second in the division, but I don't think they can sort of sustain this level of dominance that they've had over the past few years for much longer. But I just look at MacKinnon and Rantanen and Makar, and I see a lot of talent there. And I think that, I mean, MacKinnon probably won't score 140, but like Cale Makar, I'm not saying he'll score 140. That's not what I'm saying. But I think like when you have two players like that at important positions that could both be MVPs, like feasibly, I think that goes a long way. And then I'm also sort of baking into my expectations that Georgiev will, as I said, maybe regress or progress back towards maybe a bit of a better year. But interesting discussion.
We also didn't talk about Gabriel Landeskog, and he's set to return at some point. Definitely another top 20 NHL skater. The thing is, you don't really know when he's coming back. I mean, I haven't seen anything. The last I saw is that it could be, a couple weeks into the season. It could be towards the start of 2025. So that'll definitely help them out. But with such an uncertainty and his injury history at this point, it's really hard to project.
Yeah, you're pulling out all these like advanced stats, like goals against. Like, come on, I'm just going on vibes here, man.
Injured.
Yeah. So we're running a little long here. Let's move right along to the Dallas Stars, who also didn't really have a super active offseason. They also did a little bit of adding around the fringes, replaced some players that left, and maybe took a step back, maybe not. I think they overall should be okay. Should be okay on offense at least. So they're notable subtractions: Joe Pavelski, Chris Tanev, Ryan Suter, Scott Wedgwood, names like that. Notable additions: Colin Blackwell, Matt Dumba, Brennan Smith, Ilya Labushkin, Casey DeSmith. So a lot of names out, a lot of names in overall. I think that while they lost people like Joe Pavelski on the forward line, if you're baking in some kind of progression with for Wyatt Johnston and then Logan Stankoven as well, I think they'll be okay on the forward group. My biggest question is the defense. But overall, what do you think of the Stars off season?
Yeah, I'd say whereas I think the Avs could have done a much better job of shuffling the deck and sort of resetting their timeline maybe a year or a half season or so. I think the Stars actually did a great job in that. Pavelski is a big loss. I don't know that a lot of people realize just the level that he was still playing at. Maybe I'm biased because I was just such a big Joe Pavelski fan and such a big fan of that old 2010 Sharks core. But anyways, I think they did an okay enough job bringing in guys on the fringes, and especially this sets them up really well for coming off seasons when they have a lot more decisions to make about who they want to sign, who they don't, and they've given themselves a lot of flexibility because they have such a unique roster with such a unique mix of young talent and veterans.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, ditto on the Joe Pavelski note. 39 last season, still had 67 points, was second on the team. Still, still was a really solid contributor there. Why don't we go ahead and talk about who we see as their top players? I think this is an interesting discussion here, particularly for the forward group. Do you think Jason Robertson is still like the guy, or do you think Wyatt Johnston will sort of take over that helm, especially after the sort of the off or not the off the playoffs that he had?
Gosh, it's so hard to say. Because Robertson just had that one magic season. I want to say it
Right.
was 21-22, and he put up like over 100 points, scored like, I don't know, I want to say it was north of 40 goals.
Let's see. It was 22-23 where he had
Okay.
109 points and 46 goals.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But really, like looking at his play before and since then, it does kind of look like an outlier. But it's hard to have 100-point outlier season, if that makes sense. So I don't really know with Jason Robertson if it's a question of like, did he just go crazy that year and he's going to settle in as about a point per game, pretty good goal scorer,
Mm-hmm.
but just maybe won't light it up, or is he like still of another step to grow and be more consistent? It's
Mm-hmm.
so hard to say. I don't know. Maybe it's just the tape I saw last year, but I'm actually leaning towards the former, where he's might just be kind of a 80 to 85, maybe 90-point player, really solid, really good, but
Mm-hmm.
not like a number one. And that's where Wyatt Johnston comes in, and this becomes so fascinating because Johnston looks every bit the part. It's just that he's like 21, so it's so hard to say
Yeah.
whether or not he's going to be the guy. I actually really like how Rope Hintz looks this year.
Yeah.
He's really good defensively.
Mm-hmm.
He'll be their top line center, and he also is a young guy who has room to grow, playing with players like Wyatt Johnston, like Jason Robertson, like Miro Heiskanen. Even if you
Mm-hmm.
want to factor in somehow backwards play, I don't know, power play points or whatever.
Yeah.
Anyways, I'm actually going to pick Rope Hintz as probably their top performing guy this year, but
Ooh.
I think it's pretty much a coin flip.
Yeah, this is maybe one of the most interesting discussions we've got in the Central for forwards. I really do like Wyatt Johnston. I think
Understandable.
the performance that he showed last season, like in high pressure situations for them in the sorry in the playoffs, I think that was really impressive, and I think that he will sort of be the guy, honestly. So we mentioned it already. It gets tricky for the Stars, I think. If you were to pick a weakness for a team as good as the Stars, I think it's for them, it's the defense. I think the top guy is pretty clear here, right? And wouldn't you
Yeah.
agree? And Mira Heiskanen, anything you want to say about him or any other names that you find interesting for the blue line in Dallas?
I think for a long time, Heiskanen was underrated. I think now he's getting the respect he deserves as probably a top 10 defenseman. Um, yeah, I do think if you were to point out a weakness, it probably would be the defense, especially in some of their lower pairings. I mean, the fact that Matt
Mm-hmm.
Dumba is still playing in the NHL kind of
Yeah,
baffles me.
yeah,
Um, but I guess this was also the team that tendered Ryan Suter a contract. I'm not going to elaborate on that point. um, as well as was it Klingberg? Yeah, so they also really like their aging veteran guys, except instead they put them on the third pair instead of the first pair, like a different team in the Central. Anyways, I'm getting way too far into this. I do think their defense is still good, but it definitely, especially outside of their top pair, you can really pick on them given the right matchups, and that is something to see if perhaps their forwards can make up for it either defensively or just outscoring you, which I think they are capable of, and I think we'll probably
yeah,
bring up again when we get to their season outlook.
yeah. Other names to pay attention to there are Thomas Harley, obviously, and Asa Lindell. But I think, I don't know. Yeah, like you said, on the lower lines, just sort of like replacing Chris Tanev with like Matt Dumba isn't great, and it seems like the defense is kind of taking a step back. Whereas with the forward group, with the injection of names like Johnston and Stankoven, it's probably taking a step forward. Maybe if you consider like the players that they lost, like Joe Pavelski, it could be sort of could be that it's is sort of level, stationary, or doesn't take a big step forward or backward compared to last season. But
To be determined.
To be determined. Obviously, the top guy in net is Jake Ottinger, who
Yep.
I think people thought would have a better season than he did last
Yeah.
year. Yeah. What do you want to talk about in net, whether it's Ottinger or any names in sort of that backup role?
I am such a huge Jake Ottinger fan.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it was just like the whole lore behind him in that Calgary series where they like excuse me, put like a paganistic curse on him because he was just so locked down. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think Jake Ottinger's a really good goalie. I think he's still young and figuring it out. Honestly, I see him a little bit like the career path of a Jordan Binnington. Kind of had that
Mm.
playoff shining moment, but just his team couldn't go the distance.
Mm.
And I think he's going to get better. I think he's going to be a future Vezina winner. I believe I picked him last year.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it just didn't work out really last year for the Stars. And who knows, maybe with the defense it won't again. But I think he's really good and he's locked up for a long time. I think the Dallas Stars should have no worries about who's in net for them because Jake Ottinger is a really good goalie.
Yeah. Yeah. Second, everything you said there. He's going to be turning 26 this season. So like we've mentioned before, he might not even be in his prime yet. I think he's still got a lot of potential to take another step forward. I don't think he'll have as bad a season as he did last year. I do think he will take a step forward, return to sort of those career norms of like save percentages in the teens, that kind of thing for him. I mean, not necessarily a long career quite yet, but a solid career so far. And I think that could really take the Stars a long way if he does return to that level. They've got Casey DeSmith in that backup slot. Anything you want to touch on for DeSmith?
Again, maybe it's just like osmosis of Penguins fans' delusion. I think he's a good backup. I'm not going
Yeah.
to say he's more than that, but I think he's a good backup. I think he can come in for his, 20, 25 games he'll get and not lose.
Yeah.
And especially on a Stars team that has really high expectations and should be able to achieve them. I actually think that's kind of a strength for them in sort of a backwards way, I guess. But I
Yeah.
think it's a really good addition.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. I think that they look pretty solid in net, and I like the Stars. I really do. This year, in our predictions episode, I did pick them to go to the Stanley Cup Finals and lose, but I do like the Stars a lot. Let's talk now about their prospect system. Like in contrast with some of these other top teams, I mean it's not super great, but it's not as bad as the Jets or the Avs by any means. It's sort of, I would characterize it or describe it as sort of like the lower middle, like if you were to separate, I guess, into quarters, I would put it sort of at the top of that third quarter, like kind of area, maybe like somewhere in like the, I don't know, 17 to 20 range of systems. Obviously, like top heavy, or not, maybe not top heavy, but those top names of Wyatt Johnston and Logan Stankoven, those are big ones that are or not. Goodness, I am having a difficult time talking today. Wyatt Johnston obviously already having a big impact at the NHL level. Logan Stankoven was your Calder pick, right? So you expect him to have a significant impact this year. Do you want to talk a little bit more about those two, and then some other names in their prospect system that you like or could see playing into the picture here in Dallas this year? Not here in Dallas, but there in Dallas.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we already touched on Johnson, but Stankoven was just so impressive, man. Maybe
Hmm.
you could say that you think he's not going to be that good, because he was just that. I don't want to say elite, but he was like hanging easily with top tier NHL talent. He looked so good, both in his little cup of coffee he got and in the playoffs. So yeah, as you mentioned, he's my Calder pick, and I don't know, kind of confident about it. I think he's in a really good situation, playing with Johnston, playing with Hintz, playing with Robertson, Matt Duchene, Tyler Seguin, Jamie Benn. This team's really good, guys. And I think Stankoven's going to be another piece of that, just kind of a wagon as I'm projecting the Stars to be this year. Outside of Stankoven, I'd say there's a couple names that are pretty interesting. Interesting is they do have Jordan Kyrou's brother, Christian,
Hmm.
who is maybe going to see NHL time this year, but he'll probably see next year. But I feel like their next guy is probably Maverick Bork, looks pretty solid, and
Hmm.
Leon Bichelle also, both like look to be solid NHL prospects. It could be very good, could be just okay, but in terms of as prospects go, look good. So I
Yeah.
think they've got an all right farm system, which is more than a team in this window should have.
Yeah, which is a kind of a bummer for Blues fans, right? Like a team that is already elite having a prospect system that, I mean, it's not an elite prospect system, but it's like it will continue to keep them solid more than likely. So,
I've
um,
been on the record saying, and I'll say it again, I think the Dallas Stars are the best draft and develop team in the NHL. And
yeah,
it sucks to have to surrender that crown, but their hits are incomparable.
yeah, really, really well run team in Dallas. Um, I think it's easy to sort of assume or surmise what our expectations are already, but do you want to go ahead and say it anyway? So um, they were the top team in the Central, obviously last season, with a record of 52, 21, and 9, 113 points. I think they keep it going. I think they will win the division again, and as I already mentioned, make a run to the Stanley Cup Finals. What do you see as um, what is your expectation of their outlook for next season?
Yeah, as crazy as it is to say, I think they're going to shatter that 113 point mark that they hit last
Mm,
season. I think they had a little bit of a down year. I expected them to be really, really good, and they were really good, but I wouldn't say they were a world beater. So
yeah.
I'm kind of, I don't know, maybe it's a little bit of confirmation bias, but I think they're just so good. Their top line, elite. Their
Hmm.
second line, for second line, arguably elite. Their depth scoring, arguably elite. Their
Oh
top pair
yeah.
defense, arguably elite. Their bottom pair defense is, like we said, their one weakness, but their special teams should be solid. Their goaltending is at bare minimum above average. I mean, what more can you ask of an NHL team to not at least try and have them being really good? And I have them. I went back and forth on this for so long, whether or not to have them or my Pacific winner, which I guess we already kind of talked about. It was Edmonton, um,
Mm,
being the winner of the conference. I think I
yeah.
got Edmonton in a little bit more. Just I don't know. I feel like they're hungry based on that
Hmm.
playoff run, but looking solely on roster talent, I would take the Dallas Stars. That's more my vibes pick. Um, this team's going to be really good, and I have them going deep in the playoffs, that's for sure. I think anything
Mm.
short of a conference finals appearance would be a disappointment for this team. So, it remains to be seen if the young players can live up to that pressure. That is a really big deal. But the fact that guys like Johnston and Stankoven already having that experience doesn't look very good for us Central Division teams who don't want to see them win. But who knows? Maybe the loss of playoff vets like Joe Pavelski and Chris Tanev will maybe leave them a little bit more, I guess, no pun intended, green in the playoffs. But I don't know. I think they're going to be so good. I have them first in the Central without question, honestly. I think they're going to kind of bully a really good Central division.
Yeah. I didn't say this already, but I I think they do win the West, the Western Conference, in the regular season and the playoffs, obviously. But I think, like you mentioned, that secondary scoring, that scoring depth is so good. Like, we've talked about how we like the Blues scoring depth with 6 players last year that scored 20 or more. The Stars had 8, which is really good, and they lost Pavelski. But I feel like, I don't know. I feel like, goodness, why am I blanking? I feel like Logan Stankoven can maybe reach that 20 mark. And then if you have Wyatt Johnston or Jason Robertson like explode and provide that elite level scoring, I think that's going to be a big factor in that discussion as well. And then if Jake Ottinger, as we mentioned, returns to form a little bit, has a good season, like what is the weakness there? I mean, like we said, the defense is the big weakness, but I think it was still a weakness last year. And obviously they did okay. So
it feels like the floor of this team is like second, maybe third in the Central, and like second round of the playoffs at minimum. I mean, how can you not be like excited about the upside there?
We kind of sound like Stars fans right now.
Oh, believe me, I am not. I do not want to see this team win the Stanley Cup this year, which is why I have them losing.
I do too, for the record. I have them making it to the finals, but I do have them losing. Yes, we think the Stars are good, but we are not happy about it. I forgot to do this with the Avs, so I will do it now. I have not been very good about doing this with each team. For the Avs, the Blues will face them. I'm just looking through the calendar real quick, so sorry about all of the dead air. Okay, the first time they face them is January 31st in Colorado. The next time will be, I think that's right. Yes, the next time they face them will be in St. Louis, February 23rd. Game 3 will be March 29th in Colorado, and then the last game will be April 5th in St. Louis. So the Blues have a lot of Central Division matchups right at the end of the season, which could be important for them.
I have a feeling it's going to be so annoying.
It could be that as well. As for the Stars, we will get a pretty good early look at them. They're the first team the Blues play in preseason games on September 21st, which is right around the corner. And then they play them again October 3rd, also preseason. So we'll see, get a couple looks at them before the season starts, and then during the season we will match up with, I keep saying the Blues will match up with Dallas December 14th in Dallas. Game 2 will be January 25th in St. Louis, and then wait for it, Game 3 will be March 2nd in Dallas, and then I think I missed one. Unless we only play them 3 times? That doesn't sound right.
Is that October 3rd preseason? Are you sure about that?
Yes.
I'm pretty sure.
Yes, that is preseason for sure. October 8th is game 1 of the season. Anyways, I am not great at reading the schedule apparently right now, but so we'll get some good looks at Dallas early on, and we'll be sure to cover that here on Note News. As I mentioned, the best way to make sure you stay up to date with all that coverage is to subscribe to the Note News channel here on YouTube. Rate the podcast wherever you listen. We really appreciate that. That helps us out a whole lot. Like this video if you enjoyed it. Check out our other Central Division previews if you haven't already. And then follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Note News Pod. Share Note News with a friend or a family member that you think would enjoy it. All that good stuff. Alec, that's the Central Division. How do you feel about the Central for the Blues? Do you think they'll be okay, or do you think it's going to be tough?
It's going to be tough. And I think it's going to be a really big, show us what you're made of for a lot of our young players. And it'll be a very important evaluation year because the competition is going to be fierce. So, that's really exciting because you want your talent to hang with the best of the best. But obviously, there's a chance that things go wrong. So I'm excited to watch it happen. And yeah, we'll see how it all ends up.
We will see indeed. As I mentioned, we've got some good coverage of the prospect showcase coming up soon. That's this weekend where the Blues will. I believe they'll be playing the Blackhawks and Wild prospect teams this weekend. So be sure to check that out. It's gonna be really cool if you're interested in names like Dalibor Dvorsky and other guys like that. That'll be a great spot to check him out at. I believe he'll be playing, right? I think that's
Should be.
I don't think like all the guys are playing. Like I don't know if Theo Lindstein is going to be there and Otto Stenberg or I'm not sure.
I think next still out too.
Yeah. So check that out. That'll be really cool, and we're going to cover that. So that'll do it for us this time. We'll see you next time on Note News, and of course, as always, let's go Blues.
Let's go Blues. Beat the Stars.